So, sorry this video is a little bit later than expected, guys. I know I've had a couple of videos since part 1, but this is part 2 on the MR2 Repaint. So, we've had a few busy weeks in the shop. Now the new lad started, trying to get him trained up, and just trying to box off a load of little stuff out of the way so we can concentrate for the whole rest of the month on these big jobs, which is what we're on at the moment. Now, in the first video, we put the primer on this. Then I've blocked everything out with the 240 with guide coat, and then we've put the black wet on wet over this, the same as we did on the GT Turbo video, part 1, which is the last upload we did. So I've used the same wet and wet on this. So I put the wet and wet on the Sunday morning. I gave it a very short bake just to flash it off, and then as you can see here, what I've done is I've gone round and I've just nibbed the main outside parts of the panels that show, to make sure that they're well nibbed, and also one or two little areas in the door shuts. But with this being a wet on wet, I don't have to nib the whole thing. I can just nib it where I need to, and then leave the rest as a nice wet on wet sealer over the rest of the car. Now for this, we're using Kapci Basecoat. We're just using the stock colour for this MR2 because it's going back to original. I can't remember off the top of my head what the colour is, or the colour code for it, should I say. But it's a straight solid black, there's no metallic in it or anything. So what we did was we went around this with 2 full coats of the black base coat, just 2 nice wet coats, and then we went around it with full 2 coats of clear. Now, because this whole car's been sealed up with wet on wet, I don't need to sort of go gently with the base coat, even though this is solvent. I can just go straight around this, give this 2 really nice wet coats, and then just gave it a third just in case there was any little areas that had been missed. Now, I'm pretty much 99.9% sure that there have been no missed areas, bearing in mind obviously the car has already been done with a black wet on wet. The chances of there being anything that was see-through or not covered would have been slim to none. But it just gives you that little bit of a safety net. You know, on a metallic, we'd do two full wet coats, and then we'd do like a big double effect coat, or I would personally, just to make sure that everything's nice and even. So on this one, I just gave it a quick 3 coats. There's, you know, you don't have to be as accurate, so to speak, with a solid colour as you do with a metallic or a pearl. You know, you can put the pressure up a little bit higher, open the fluid out a little bit more, because you're going to get no mottling or anything because there's no metallics or pearls in there, so you've got no issues with any of that. So we can just put down a couple of really nice wet coats and basically just smash it on and get it done. And then I have found recently, and I was talking to the technical rep about this, if I leave this base a little bit longer between coats and also leave the clear a little bit longer between coats than I was originally, then I'm finding that my gun finish is absolutely spot on. I'm keeping a better gun finish. I was finding that it's probably maybe down to me, maybe, I don't know, maybe going a little bit too heavy, or maybe rushing it a little bit too quickly for the second coat, maybe going a little bit too soon after it had just matted off and not giving it quite enough flash off time. And sometimes it would just pull back a tiny little bit, especially if we like loaded the clear up heavy. But I found that if I give it like 10 to 15 minutes in between coats of clear, especially at the moment when it's hotter in the UK than it is normally, so the boo's running quite hot at the moment without the spray cycle running anyway, so I'm tending to find that because of that I can apply the clear a bit wetter, but then in applying the clear a bit wetter I'm almost overloading it in a way, so giving it that extra flash off to let all them solvents evaporate out before I go putting the next coat on is having a big impact on the gun finish, and a big impact for the positive as well. Now you'll notice with most of these panels I'm going around all the edges first, and then I'm filling in the centers, so I'm doing all the tricky bits that, for instance, like some of you novice guys watching, you might miss those little intricate bits if you don't get them out of the way first, and then just fill in the blanks in the middle. I always paint like this. I find it's an easy way to do it. If I go around all the awkward areas first, I know then that they're covered, and then you've got obviously the big area in the middle that you can just literally whip over and as I said, sort of fill in the blanks. Not that it's like paint by numbers or anything, but you know what I mean. Just do the tricky areas, and then you can fill in the larger, easier to hit areas after. That way you're making sure that you've always got full coverage everywhere. When you get panels or parts bolted on, there's no edges or anything that have been missed, you know. And again, just take your time. We've purposely used a black wet on wet on this so that we've got basically full coverage to start with. So we just need to put a couple of fresh coats of base coat over this wet on wet. There's one or two tiny little rub throughs down to the grey primer, but they're absolutely minuscule, so there's no need to go, you know, like re-wet on wetting it in any areas, especially with it being a black. It's going to cover in one single coat this car look covered, but we want to give it a couple of coats of base and then obviously a couple of coats of clear to make sure there's plenty of colour there, and obviously plenty of protection as well. Now on something like the I guess you call it the bonnet, so to speak, is what I'm doing here, and the boot, these were prepped up and freshly wet on wet. We didn't denib these because these were wet on this particular day just before we got the shell prepped up, and then they were just cleaned up, and then obviously we can shoot straight on top of those. Now these vents are pretty awkward to get inside, so if you notice that I'm doing the vents first, like I've just said, I'm trying to hit them from all the different angles to make sure I've got full coverage inside all these fins and inside all these grooves, to make sure that everything is nice and even all the way through. Now I've now switched to moving the opposite direction to make sure I can get all the undersides. Before then I'll hit the whole panel as a whole. Again, I'm just concentrating more to make sure that I've got full coverage in all these little tight areas. Before then I move on to the larger part of the panel for the full colour up and the full base. Now as long as you're not going too heavy in them vents, when you fully cover over like I am now, and I'm going straight over these vents again, there shouldn't be any issues with you getting runs as long as you're not going too heavy. I am giving this a full wet coat, but inside them vents I was more feathering the trigger, concentrating on where I'm putting the paint more than anything, because you know, if you're getting runs or you're getting sags and stuff like that, I'd say, you know, you need to look at your gun settings a little bit, especially as the weather changes. At the moment in the UK, the weather's turned more towards the warm side, but we still get that odd cold damp day. Like today, in particular, has been one of those randomly cold damp days. Not cold, but I'd say damp. And it can all affect the way that your clear lays and the way that your base coat lays, and also the fact that with how your paint dries. Because if it's a damp day and you're using water base, that water base is going to take a lot more drying than it is on like a hot summer's, like a dry summer's day. You know, on a humid summer's day it might take a little bit longer as well, so you just need to bear that in mind with like your thinner choices and your hardener choices. We tend to slow our thinner choice down a notch in the summer, because especially with metallics, if you carry on using like a fast thinners, it can cause issues with the lay down with the metallics. So we'll knock the speed down, you know, to the, say if we're using a fast, then we'll move to a standard, or if it's a really hot day we might even use a slow in the base coat just to make sure that everything lays and blends nicely. The same with the clear coats. I'll tend in the winter to use maybe an extra fast and a fast on the larger jobs, just because of the temperature difference. Whereas in the summer we may use a standard or a slow on a big repaint. I believe on this one I was using a standard, because it's not a very big area to get around anyway, so it's not like I have to worry too much about trying to keep a wet edge on there, because the size of the shell, and obviously when I'm clearing up I'm moving a lot faster, so it's not going to take me a massive amount of time to go round, and I don't really have to worry about the dry edge as much. Now you'll notice that in some areas I'm giving it an extra coat, in other areas I'm not. So round like where them vents are, I don't need to go as much with the colour inside there, so you could two coat inside where them vents are, because that's all covered up by a plastic vent on the outside. There's other areas like say around the boot shut, you could just give them two coats instead of giving them the three that you're giving on the main body, because some areas just aren't seen. So in effect you don't need to go as much in those areas. You still want it to be nice and you still want it to be fully covered, So like the main sections there that you see, we're going to make sure that they're all fully coated and they're all fully covered. The centre section you don't need to worry about so much. Where the grills and stuff cover up, you don't need to worry about as much either. We tend to do that a lot as well when it comes to clear. So the backs of panels, we'll tend to give most of the backs of panels just one really heavy coat of clear, because we're not nibbing and polishing and doing anything like that. Whereas the insides, the outsides of the panels that are on the main body of the car and the main shell, will give that 2 full coats of clear, because again, it needs that extra protection, and we're going to be denibbing it and flattening and polishing it and that sort of thing. So that extra build does make a difference. But in some areas, you just don't need that extra colour or that extra clear. Now, it's not a case of scrimping on the job, it's just genuinely not needed. And from factory, they've only got 1 coat of clear on them anyway from factory. So we're already putting twice the amount of clear down on most of these vehicles than the factory does. You know, in a standard sort of factory environment anyway, and that goes for anything from like prestige cars to, you know, your everyday standard cars. They just get 1 coat in a factory. So we are going that little bit extra by putting these 2 full wet coats on. But as you can tell by this, it's going down nicely. Now this Kapci is 1-to-1. So I think I have got fast thinners in this base coat. Because it's 1-to-1, it does spray rather nice. I can get it on nice and wet. The fast thinners will help it flash off a lot quicker. So I can get this coat on, I can go out, have to, you know, grab a bottle of water, mix some more paint up, come back in, and then put my next coat on, without shortening the flash off time too much, and also making sure that it's more than dry enough before I start putting the next coat down. Because although sometimes it looks like it's matted off, a lot of base coats, if you apply them too heavy, it might have just skinned over a slight bit on the top. So even though it looks dry, just maybe give it an extra 5-10 minutes. It won't do it any harm. Most base coats have got an open time of hours, so you know, if you base this car up now and then I went and had some dinner and did a few phone calls and a few emails, I could come back and clear it, and the clear would quite happily stick with no issues. I think most base coats are about 4 to 12 hours, I think, off the top of my head. It's not something that I massively look at, to be fair, on a TDS sheet, because we don't normally base stuff up one day or clear it the next day or anything like that. We tend to try and get the base and clear stage all done on the same day. Now, the gun that I've been using for this so far has been the Fuji MPV8. I'm going to be using the same gun for clear. Now, I have this week just grabbed W400, the old W400, not the new W400. Unfortunately, I've not managed to pick one of those up yet, but I'm hoping to in the next week or so, and then start doing some work with the Series 2 W400. As a lot of you guys know, on the channel, I am a big fan, and always have been a big fan of Iwata, and they've just brought out their new Series 2 W400, which I am very excited to get hold of and try when I get a chance in the next few weeks. Now for the clear coat, we're using the Kapci 6030 HS clear. It's a very, very nice clear. I'm running this 2-to-1, and I've got 10% thinners in it, just to help with the flow out, because again, in the winter I was finding it was better with a little bit less thinners, because our mixing room is warm. However, now the temperature is going higher and higher here in the UK at the moment, and we're sort of getting towards, I'd say, probably the warmest months of the year for us. That 10% thinner in there does make a bit of a difference. Now, I'm running this at 2 bar, I'm running it at full fan, and I think I'm running this about 3.5 turns out on the fluid. It was a really warm day. As you can probably tell by the way that this is going down, I wasn't sort of hanging around putting the clear on this. I wanted to put 2 really good wet coats on, because this particular job we're mirror finishing it, so it's going to get a 1500 disc, a 3000 Trizac, and then a harsh cut, and then a full DA final polish to make sure that this black is perfectly flat, and also perfectly glossy as well. So I'm putting 2 full wet coats on. I'm not putting like 1 light wet coat and then 1 heavy wet coat. I'm putting 2 really heavy wet coats on. I'm giving this a flash off between these 2 coats, I would say, of at least 15 minutes. I found that if I do apply it this heavy on a bigger job, it will pull back a little bit, just because obviously I'm trapping a lot of solvent in there. And I know I said before I was probably rushing, but I wouldn't say I was rushing. I just think it wasn't accounted for the fact of just how heavy I was loading the clear on. So as with a lot of things, I am still learning. That is the whole point of the channel as well. The new things that I learn, I'm trying to pass on to you guys. So especially in these hotter months where it's tempting to maybe load a bit more clear up, just think about the fact that even though it's hotter and it will flash off on the surface that touch quicker, the layer and the thickness and the film build of it is a lot heavier than usual. So there is still a lot of trap solvents in there. It may be sort of touch dry on the surface or tacky on the surface, and you might think, right, it's tacky and it's ready for its next coat. Just give it an extra few minutes. You can tell there by just how wet and how reflective that panel has gone just off 1 coat, just how sort of heavy and not carefully I'm putting the clear on, so to speak. So that's one thing that I've tweaked this last few weeks, is I've just been tweaking how I've been doing it and how long I've been leaving between each coat of clear, and also the same amount of time for baking it. I'm just giving it that 10-15 minutes while I wash my gun out, while I take my suit off and do a few little bits and bobs before I hit the bake, to make sure that it's got plenty of time to let as much of this solvent evaporate out and naturally flash off as possible before I go shooting the next big coat on there. Now, you'll probably notice on the first coat I'm almost, again, kind of missing some of these vent areas. I'll hit them on the second coat, the same as with the boot. I've done the outside of the boot, but I've not done the inside of the boot with clear. Again, that will get 1 really heavy wet gun finish coat of clear on the second coat, rather than doing it 2 full coats. It's the inside of the panel. It's not subject to as much UV or weather or chemicals or anything like that. We also won't be nibbing and polishing it or anything. It'll just be left gun finish on the inside. The same as this week, I've done a Volkswagen Polo. It had a new door on it. Again, the outside of the door had 2 coats. The inside just got 1 really heavy wet coat, and it looked factory when it was bolted back up. There was no issues with it. It looks factory. There's plenty of protection on there. Everything was fully covered. There was no dry spots or anything like that. I want it basically just 1 wet coat like that quarter panel is there. 1 really nice gun finish wet coat, and leave it at that. Now, we've got a lot of videos coming up at the minute. There's going to be a very varied amount of videos. Like I said, we've got this one that we're just finishing off at the moment. I've just got a few little bits of panel work left to do on this before we get this polished and we get this finished off. So when I get the next bit recorded on this, I'll get that edited and then drop that in as and when I can. We've got part 2 on the Renault 5 GT Turbo to come up, where we painted Chris's. We've got the start of the bay window camper, and we'll have the series on the bay window camper that we've got in, that we'll be doing as we go along. And I've also been recording some repair jobs with the Kiko kit. Been trying to do a little bit of a revisit video to the W400 and also the Bel Area as well, which we've got on at the shop at the moment, and just try and sort of switch the content up a little bit. Some videos at the moment are doing a lot better than others, but it's never really for me about the view count. It's trying to make a video that's got content for you guys and that you guys can see something new in, or find out something from, or I can pass some information on from, rather than just throwing a video up for the sake of making views. I know like the DIY videos always get massive views, a lot more so than like a spray gun review or a product review or something like that. But it's always good, and it's one thing that I'm keen to do, is to keep that variation in the content, whether it does get the the views or not. I think the varied content and the honest content is better than just steering videos one way or the other just for views. I would rather keep the channel in that way, and videos do what they do, rather than just gearing stuff towards views. It's not what I started the channel for. I didn't start it for views or for sponsorships or for ambassadorships or anything like that. Obviously the last sort of 12 months the channel has grown rather a lot. It has opened up a lot of opportunities for me, which I am very thankful for to you guys, because without you guys watching these videos, liking, sharing, supporting, none of that would be possible now that we've got to work with some of the most amazing firms in the world. Obviously we're working alongside SP Supplies for many years, and the guys there, they're absolutely amazing guys. Early back in January time, we started working with Kapci coatings. We use all their products on our training days, we use all their products in our shop. We made that decision because it was what was good for us as a business, and it'd bring lots of new content to the channel and show maybe some different paint ranges that not many people know about as well. And also recently as well, I've been the honour to get to work with Kiko UK. I'm very much think that they will be a massive name in this industry. I mean, they already are a massive name in the industry, but they are going to become more of a sort of household name in this industry over the next few years as the electric market in cars gears up, which is why, since we've had that kit put in, I've tried to steer clear of using my older kit, my stud pulling kit. Not because it's no good, but just for the sake of I want to learn to use their kit properly and progress my skills. The better I get with the kit, the more content I can show you guys with it. And again, why we wanted to put their kit in at our shop, because the brands that we decide to work with and the people that we decide to work with, it's not based on money that they offer us, it's not based on massive discounts they offer us. We work with the brands and people that we work with because they are good brands, they are great people, they have a good vision in the industry, and they have good goals as far as the business goes, good customer service, and also exceptional kit as well. And that's why and how I pick what brands and what people that we choose to work with as a business and as a channel. But at the same time, it will always remain unbiased. I am not tied into any of these firms. We can review any product or show any other product we want. That's not an issue. That is always a stipulation of mine, that we will not have our hands tied and we can always show and say what we want. It's my channel, regardless of whatever firm comes along, it will always remain my channel. It will not be bought out by somebody. We will not be swayed by somebody. It will remain very much unbiased. And as changes, you'll see my you might think that my tastes might change slightly in spray guns. It's more a case of, as technology improves, as my skills increase, and as I learn new things and try different products, we may change brands every now and again and switch and change. But I've always got my out and out favourites. When it comes down to spray guns, I've been using this Fuji now for, I'd say, probably about 2-3 months. It's absolutely phenomenal. Really nice spray gun. But I do have my favourites. I'm a big fan of Sata. Big fan of Iwata. Iwata is where I started many years ago, and I started this channel using my Bell area, which we've just managed to put another one into the shop, which I've been using this week, and it's absolutely phenomenal. And the WS400, the original WS400, it's, I suppose, old technology now. It's an old gun. It's got plenty of years under its belt, but it still performs, you know, for the price of it. The performance is absolutely phenomenal. It felt a bit weird picking it back up again. It doesn't seem to. This Fuji, for instance, is a very, very wet gun. It absolutely shoots paint out. It fires it out like no one's business. The W400 was a touch slower, but the difference in the finish and the laydown on the actual clear coat with it was just miles apart. And obviously, Iwata are bringing their Series 2 out. I'm very, very keen to try and get one of them in. Just need to get a few jobs out, and then I'll be buying one of them so that we can try out and get some reviews done and some videos done with. If the Series 2 WS clear gun lives up to its name, and I don't see any reason why it wouldn't, if I'm honest with you. With the improvements that I've heard and some of the feedback that I've heard about it so far, and also the new digital gauge, I really like the idea of the new digital gauge, which is built into the handle, but it's removable. It's like magnetic. It's very different compared to a lot of the other digital gauges out there. One thing that always bugged me with the Welcome was that I had to pop it on and pop it off, and I ended up losing one of them because of that. I don't know if I put it in my paint suit or I put it in my camera bag or something, but I ended up losing one somewhere along the line. Whereas Iwata's is like a magnetic. It's part of the handle, it's part of the spray gun. So you can pop it off when you clean it, but it's not in the way when you're painting, which I think is an absolutely awesome idea. It's also the way that they've done the battery is very simple to change, and anyone can change it. You could literally go down to your local shop, grab a battery for it pretty much anywhere, and change it yourself. I know that, I think it's the DeVilbiss digitals. I think you have to send them off. I don't think you can change the batteries in them yourself. And you know, if you're spending that kind of money on a digital spray gun, you want to be able to change your battery yourself, or at least I do anyway. But anyway, sorry for the sort of random rant or chat, so to speak, all the way through this video. I hope you guys have enjoyed the base and clear stage on this MR2. As you can see, it's come up well. There was a couple of nibs in it, but nothing excessive. It came out nice and flat. There's plenty of clear on there. I mean, you can probably tell by the reflection there. You can very clearly see my suit and my air fed and everything. So it's come up nice, it's straight, it's flat, it's really looking nice. This will now get left for probably a week to 10 days to fully rock harden off while we're doing all the panels and all the other bits. And then once them are done, we will then do the flat and polish stage on the shell. So that's it for me for today, guys. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and I'll see you again soon for the next one. Bye for now.